Hello there. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. In the modern world, there are thousands of professions: plumber, scientist, city planner, artist, project manager, fashion designer, and so on and so forth. In this podcast, we want to explore the nature of work through the eyes and ears of such practitioners. What got them into it? What is interesting about it? How do they keep up as well as advance? Why it is important and how the careers have evolved. We hope it is useful to you in whatever career stage you are in. Today, we welcome Handol Kim. Handol is a co-founder and CEO of Variational AI, a leading AI for drug discovery startup based in Vancouver, Canada. Handol brings over 20 years of deep software and tech experience, executive experience as well at venture-backed startups and publicly listed tech companies. Welcome, Handol.
Thank you, Krish. Happy to be here.
Yeah, where does this podcast find you today?
Today in sunny Vancouver, Canada.
Oh, sunny Vancouver. It is also sunny in here in Seattle. That's
Yeah,
wonderful
so
to
it's a
know.
rare day where it's sunny in Seattle and Vancouver.
Yes, it is. It is. It is. It is. So at the outset, let's start about tell us something more about yourself.
Sure. Handel Kim, co-founder and CEO. As you mentioned, Krish, I have about 25 years of experience, mainly in venture-backed startups in San Francisco Bay Area and Canada and Asia Pacific. But also, this is my second or third company that I founded. And it's been a great journey. I did start my career actually working for the Canadian government. I was a diplomat for about 7 or 8 years, and I was working with a lot of Canadian tech companies in Taiwan at the time, and especially around the semiconductor industry. And it was a fascinating sort of thing to work on. And then when I moved to the Bay Area, I just thought this is what I want to do. And so I've been in tech ever since, and I quit government and haven't looked back.
Fascinating, fascinating combination of tech and diplomacy. Okay, that's great. I think this is
The
going to be a very
world
interesting
the world
conversation.
needs a lot of diplomacy now, especially with what's going on in the global economy.
Yes, yes, yes. So, as I mentioned, this is the Nature of
Mhm,
work podcast. So we don't tend to go deep on what the company is building. That is for a different type of podcast. But
mhm.
here I'm trying to explore the nature of work, how people work, how they collaborate to bring things together. What are the challenges in the logistics of the workplace? How different workplaces are structured based on what they built. Right? It's more about the culture. It is the soft aspects of building stuff. The hard aspects we explore in other podcasts. So I just wanted to let you know how this will go.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's begin. How many people in work in variational?
So as of Monday, it's Thursday today. We'll have 14. And when we first started the business, it was 5 people at the outset when we started the company, and we were all co-founders. And it was that way for the better part of 2 years. After we raised a seed round, then we got up to about 9 full-time employees, and then we closed another seed extension round a couple of months ago, and we've been hiring since. So we should end up at about 16 or 17 uh, full-time employees. We're headquartered in Vancouver, Canada, but we do
Uh-huh.
have workers who are fully remote in New York State, in California, and then in other parts of Canada as well. But the headquarters are in Vancouver. But we're fully hybrid. Even the people in Vancouver, we come into the office 2 days a week, or they can come in as often as they want.
Right, right. That's more of what I've been hearing and
Yeah,
coming across, except for the big companies which are like asking people to come to work, right?
yeah.
When we say this, we are a fully remote company. Um, the one thing that I immediately trigger on is how do they, how do they like, actually create the culture at work? Do they start out with, talking about it, or does it just evolve over time? What has been your model, and what have you learned being like a remote only company?
Yeah, well, I mean, so it's this is not my first experience working in a fully remote sort of capacity. But I mean, our company we started in 2019 before COVID, and
Uh-huh.
before that we were all in the office every day, just like a typical company. And
Yeah.
then when COVID came in, we were like, okay, so it's fully remote as it was. And then we kind of thought, oh, let's, come in a couple of days a week. And the culture sort of had to fit into these changing dynamics. And so this has been very unusual. But like I said, I've been in most of my career has been in you come into the office every day, you work together with a team until about 2007, 2008, I worked in a fully remote BD capability or capacity for a company based in Toronto,
Uh-huh.
and I was on the road all the time. And so because you're on the road all the time, you basically work wherever you can find an internet connection, because
Right.
most of your value is customer facing and you're on the road and you're trying to close deals. Going back to headquarters is just you do because your boss wants you there, you've got to give an update or whatnot. So I learned how to work remotely and be effective remotely. Now, that was basically on that function of being customer facing sales and BD. Whereas on the technical side, if you're an engineer, you're a product team, it is very important to be together. And I understand that not all job functions,
Yeah.
um, you know, can be organized the same way. But for us, the culture was really at first when it's all co-founders, the culture is very different. It's like we're all, significant equity holders, we're all, taking a risk to build this thing that is ours. And so the culture kind of is the culture. It's just like everyone is working really hard and you don't really think about, the culture. And it's generally kind of, monolithic or uniform in terms of the profile of the people. I'm the business person. That's why I'm the CEO. Everyone else was a machine learning scientist, like not
Yeah.
engineers, actual scientists, right? And
Right.
PhDs in computer science and whatnot. So already it's a different sort of culture than other engineering and software driven organizations that I've been part of, right? And
Uh-huh.
there's that old saying, like, what's the difference between like a scientist and an engineer? Is, when an engineer talks to you, they look at your shoes. Whereas if it's a scientist, they look at their own shoes, right? So it's a very sort of different thing as well. And you can't drive a scientific team like an engineering team. And so the culture has been extremely scientific, and that's
Yeah.
very rigorous. But also, you have to get used to extreme, technical risk, right? It's not an engineering problem, it's a science problem. It's no one's done it before. And so as a
Sure.
result, you have to drive progress and work in a different way. It's very creative. It's very sort of like this idea and that idea. And the guardrails are kind of, way, way, way more abstract because you're really trying to figure out how if this thing actually does even work, right?
Uh-huh.
So the culture was kind of it was set in that way. And then when we raised our first seed round, then we hired, outside people. And we tended to hire more machine learning people, and they were scientists as well. But we did hire chemists and
Right.
people who were in medicinal chemistry and computational chemistry, and they are also scientists, but from a different discipline. And so the main difference is that in drug discovery, we're looking for molecules that bind to proteins that create some kind of therapeutic effect that
Right.
eliminate cancer or diabetes or ALS or what have you. And this
Uh-huh.
is a highly experimental process, and that's the reason why we're bringing AI into the mix. Is in
Right.
order to create a drug, it takes a very long time.
Before you delve into that
Yeah,
handle, I need to know. See, you said you were a distributed team with different skill sets of people in different places. So, do you how much time do you spend in deliberately working on culture? Because I mean, I could be working remotely with just like me for months on together. So do you do anything actively to promote the concept of or facilitate the easing of we're all a team, right? Because like working from home could just be dull. So what do you do actively to have that get the team that we're all part of the team. We're not working for ourselves together in our own little cubes.
yeah. So, our case is a little different because on the machine learning side, they tend to be more individual
Ah,
contributors, right? So we all
ah,
come together and the ideas come back and forth. But then after that interaction, you're far more productive working on stuff by yourself, running experiments, sharing your tensor boards, sharing your wikis, etc., and then
Right.
interacting virtually. Even in a lot, even in a company where everyone is together, I mean, how often do you like, oh, I don't want to walk to that side of the campus and like, let me just pull up a window and we're going to be talking, even though we're technically in the office working for the same company. So to a
Right.
certain extent, it's a bit more of an honest type of thing like that. The job functions that we had early on lent themselves to individual contribution and then intermittent sort of like group contribution to kind of get the ideas. Then you go off and you do your thing and you come back again. But when we introduced the chemistry group to, and they're experimental scientists, so they're used to working with their hands, working in a lab and
Yeah.
dealing with physical things
Right.
versus machine learning, it's CS, it's all math, it's all abstract, it's digital, right?
Uh-huh.
And so what I would say is that that was a type of different culture and mentality
Yeah.
that both sides had to fit towards. Now, I make no apologies for this. We are AI first because that's what we do. That's our primary differentiation. But at the same time, we have to be, cognizant and be aware of the limitations of chemistry and biology and whatnot. And so it's very much ensuring that one side is not overly dominant,
Uh-huh.
in the wrong place. And that's the hard thing is sometimes AI can make a very positive impact on a problem that seems intractable from an experimental science. But at
Uh-huh.
the same time, sometimes, it does stupid things. And we need an expert in chemistry to say, no, no, that's stupid. Let's not do that because we don't know the difference from a machine learning perspective. We go like, oh, okay, now we understand why it's stupid. Let's not do that and let's listen. So there's that interaction. And the thing is in the interview process, every member of the team interviews everyone else, and we come to generally a consensus. And so
Uh,
that, and it's never heated, but it's kind of self-selecting in terms of the kinds of people that can work in this sort of modality, right? Because not everyone can. And we've lost people. We've lost co-founders. We lost one co-founder because he moved to Boston and he was working remote. He didn't like it and he wanted to be in the office with people. And I can't blame him, right? He was younger and I've been working in offices for a long time. If I never see another office again, I'm fine. But for
yeah.
him, it was, being sort of Gen Z, it was important to feel that sense of place and camaraderie and interaction with other people, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
generationally also, it's very different for different generations. So he's like, look, I'm gonna go find a job in Boston, in a non-competitive area, and we wished him well. And he's
Right.
perfectly
Right.
fine, still a significant shareholder, and he was, very impactful and bears a lot of credit for taking us to where we are today.
Sure,
That
sure.
said,
Handel, I find that the scenario of needing to make the younger people feel that they will get a lot of attention and a growth path, even if they join the company at a young age or a early stage, because like when they go to the office, they are able to meet senior people and have chats, chats like that on the hallway, right? But
right.
here you'll have to you'll have the opportunities are less, right? Because you have to be deliberate about it.
Well, it was part of that was about, water cooler chatter, learning from people who are experienced. But it was also, I think, in his case, more like I would like to work in a team. And right now, I'm at home. You're at home. We don't work as a team. And I think he missed that camaraderie of people working next to each other, and then looking over and saying, hey, this, that, the other thing, going out and having a lunch and actually having some fun. And so I kind of see that as a bit of a failing on our side, is that we never really prioritized, sort of levity or cohesion from on an interpersonal side as much as we could have. And
Right.
we all get along fine and all, but it's not like, I've been in many companies where people get up like, all right, we're all going to lunch, and we go and you have your lunch and you talk to and you make, friendships, right?
Right.
Or you go
Right.
on the road with somebody and you become friends, and then you become, your colleagues, but you're also friends and you forge these relationships. In our context, it was all like we're all coworkers, and sure, we got along with each other, but it
Yeah.
wasn't like I'm going to call them up on the weekend and go, hey, let's go grab a beer. I mean, that level, and I think a lot of it has to do with sort of the the profile of the people, right?
Yeah.
Personality types. Not everyone is into that, right? But
Right.
working as a sales BD guy, everyone's like an A-type personality and all extrovert. Let's go out and yeah, and then you go out and you have your fun. But these are scientists. They generally are not and also machine learning researchers. So they're even more
More serious people,
yeah, well, more introverted, right?
introverted.
They're
Yeah.
not sort of like, hey, how's your mother? It's kind of like, I'm not going to talk unless, I have something to say. And everyone's fine. It's just that they're not as outgoing as people
Uh-huh.
normally would. If especially in a company where you have multiple functions, you have
Uh-huh.
marketing, you have finance, you have engineering, you have sales, and all of these people, everyone is different, right?
Yeah.
But for us, we were very much uniform on the machine learning on the research side. And so it felt more like a faculty, more like a lab than it did a business, right? And
Right.
I think that's what he was craving. And he's found that. And so we're happy for him. But as
Okay.
we grow, that becomes a challenge. And as we onboard new people, because now this is arguably our third wave of people, and
Uh-huh.
the culture question weighs heavily on my mind. Like, what culture do we have? And the old saying is, if you don't create a culture, one will be created for you.
For you.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not a good culture. I mean, I'd like to think that we have a good culture, but we've not really willfully thought about it very much. It's just been sort of emergent. And so far it's been okay. But
Okay. Yeah.
going
Yeah.
forward, if we become 100 people or 200 people or 1,000 people, what's the culture? And I don't know. As the CEO, I kind of lie awake at night going like, what exactly is the culture? You know,
Yeah.
if there are certain hallmarks of a culture, we want to keep people who are curious, right? That's the main thing, is curiosity about things that are not necessarily solely within your wheelhouse, but intellectually curious and more of a like, hey, this would be good if we could try it like this instead of that. That's
Uh-huh.
one of the things that we really look for. And then an ability to just interact productively with the rest of the team, which means that we're generally going to get a bit more, serious or introverted people, which is
Right.
fine, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
different job functions will act differently as well.
Absolutely. One of the key aspects, I think, of culture is also the space that you work in.
Hmm.
Uh, what are your, how have you planned or thought about the place that people come into work, or in their, maybe in their garage, because you guys are a startup, or, what have you thought about? Anything to share on that aspect?
You know, when we started the company, we basically the initial kernel of money that funded us for the first few months was from a contract that we did for the FDA. And it
Uh-huh.
was around, using machine learning to predict failure modes of medical devices, which is not what we do, but hey, it was a decent amount of money. We got the contract. We used that functionally as sort of money to kick off the company, and that was great, right? And at that time, we were working on top of a coffee shop, and that was basically they had this one table, and we'd get there early, and we'd like block it out, so we were all working there. And then we ended up finding sort of these hot desks from the same company that where we co-load our servers, right, our GPUs. And
Yeah. Oh,
so
wow.
we worked there, part like we were one group within like three or four other groups, and that was okay. We didn't have our own private space, but we had like board meetings or rooms that we could book, et cetera, et cetera. And so we were there for, well, the better part of 2 years. And then when we got our seed funding, um, because it was post-COVID, and we thought we're not all coming into the office every day, so we don't need to spend money on something really nice. So we just kept doing it until we got kicked out, and then had to move into another office in a different part of the same building.
Mm.
But this office was bigger and it was ours, but it was I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't a very nice office. The carpets were disgusting, and there were mice, and
Oh,
and it was
sorry
just
to hear
really,
that.
and it was loud. And as a drug company, you often experiment on mice. And I was just thinking like,
Oh my
if,
God,
if we
that is
had
so
a drug,
hilarious. Uh-huh.
if we had a drug, we could just catch the mice and experiment on them. But yeah. And then as we hired people, there were people who were deathly afraid of rodents. And so it's not like I'm a fan, but this one time we had a meeting, and this mouse like basically came from the ceiling and was scuttling down this Cat 6 cable like in the
Uh-huh.
corner in the middle of the meeting, and it became very bold. They were cute. They were little mice. If they were rats, I would have been out of there. But So, you kind of chalk that up to, some of these origin stories, and we worked in this mouse infested, and of course the VCs love that. It was like, oh, you guys are hardcore, and it's not like it was just like the best bang for the buck. It was extremely cheap for that reason, and so we stayed there. And then now that we've got our new funding and we're growing the team, place does become very important, and you don't realize the impact on a day-to-day basis of
Uh-huh.
if you're working in a dump, then you don't have the comfort, you don't have the confidence there. It weighs on you, psychologically in ways that you maybe are not conscious of. So
Yeah.
it's not like breaking the bank, but we are moving to a nice office. It's still very reasonable, given the real estate, but it is a step above, and it's nice. And now I think that there are going to be people who might come into the office more often if they want, because it's a nice space.
What
Whereas
about the
before it was
scientists? What about the scientists and the ML guys?
so yeah, I mean I'm hoping they'll come in more, but it's up to them, right? It doesn't really matter to me. Like
Okay, okay.
yeah, I mean, the marketing guy wants to come in on a regular basis, and everyone's home life is different, right? Some people they've got a great home setup. Other people like have children who run around and turn off their computers. Like one of our, he'll be on a call, and then his daughter will come and say, no, 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 don't turn off the computer, because she'll just turn it off.
Yeah.
So as long as there's the flexibility, and there's a good place that's welcoming, and it's nice, so it's such that you don't go like, oh my God, I'm gonna go into this dump and work here for like 8 hours or 9 hours. Like we don't want people like dreading coming into the office, right? And it'd be nice if it was a welcoming place and conducive to collaboration and conducive to the creative process, right?
Yeah.
And also
Yeah.
somewhat, a place you're not embarrassed to tell people where you work. That would be nice.
Or bring potential customers in, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, luckily, our customers are like pharmas, and they never really visit us, except starting to. So it has to be at least like half decent, right? Like it
Right.
can't be ostentatious where they go like, oh, so this is where all the money is going. But it's got to be, I mean, it's got to be somewhere where you're not embarrassed, right?
Yeah, right, right. Strike a good balance.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And we found it. We're very fortunate. So we're going to be
Okay.
moving in June. But
All
right
right.
now we're bunked out at our VC's office because they've got extra space. Of
Yeah.
course, they like that because they can keep an eye on us. But but it's free too, and so we're here for 3 months while the new space is being renovated, and then we'll move in.
Very nice. Good luck with the new move.
Thank you.
Uh, so let's switch gears. We talked about culture, space. Maybe we'll touch on say similar aspects later on in the podcast. Let's switch gears to the technical and the technical aspects of what you're building.
Hmm.
Without using many buzzwords, but feel free to use technical terms without buzzwords
Sure.
uh, to describe what you guys are trying to build and trying to change in the world.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, the problem we're tackling is drug discovery, and some qualifiers there. So people may or may not know that discovering a drug, like a medicine, is extremely risky, extremely expensive, and takes a very long time. On average, like 12 to 14 years from start to an approved drug.
12 to 14 years. Give me some examples of something that started way ago and then only now we have a drug for it.
I don't know, like Ozempic,
Oh, yes, yes, yes,
like
because Ozempic is it's been
Viagra, like pretty much every drug takes a very long time. And and you can divide the process, let's say it's 12 years, right? You can draw a line, 40% of the time and expense comes in what we call the preclinical phase or the discovery phase. And then 60% of the expense and the time comes in the development, which is clinical development and then approval, right? And the earlier you are, the basically the less money is spent, but that it grows. And then once you're in clinical trials, it grows as well. So, but in the discovery process, that's where we're focused, right? We are there to develop or discover molecules that have a higher probability of going through clinical development. Your phase one, your phase two, your phase three, and then getting approved, right? So if you look at why it's expensive and why
so
it's
the molecule is the if I take a tablet, the tablet consists of molecules, right?
That's right. That's right. So,
Yeah,
so pretty much there are two types of drugs, if I'm just breaking it down. One is a small molecule, which is a pill,
a
right?
pill. Yeah.
It's a chemical. It's a pill you take, and then it goes through and it acts on whatever. Whereas the other type of drug is known as a biologic, and that's like a shot. It's a protein or an antibody, right? And the difference is that, a small molecule is maybe 100, 150 atoms. It's very small, right? It's a very small sort of molecule, whereas a biologic it's not a chemical, it's a biological agent, right? And it might be hundreds of thousands or millions of atoms, right? And that's why you can't take it as a pill necessarily, because you can't synthesize it as a chemical. It has to be some kind of thing that is somewhat alive or somewhat bioactive, and then it interacts in a different way, right?
Yeah.
So 90% or sorry, 70% of the drugs are small molecule. That's what you go to the pharmacist and you get a prescription. It's generally going to be a pill, right?
Yeah.
But biologics are a very fast growing segment of the market. In fact, I think 6 out of the 10 top selling drugs today are biologics, like Keytruda, for example, for Merck makes like 20 billion a year, right? So
Yeah.
Humira, all these drugs that are massive blockbuster drugs, most of them are biologics, and that's an area of fast growth, right? But that is the province of biology. We're in small molecules in chemistry, and they're quite different in terms of how they work, right? Both approaches have their pros and their cons, right? Depending on the target and the mechanism of action. But by and large, we focus on the small molecule. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a structure of a molecule. So and you can represent these in some kind of like a string of characters, or usually in some kind of notation, some kind of graphical representation of a molecule, a picture, right? A schematic of a molecule, if you will, right? And that's
Yeah.
what chemists operate in. And so really what we're doing is we've created basically like Midjourney, if you're familiar with a diffusion model that, based on a text prompt, like a blue cat riding a unicycle eating pizza on Mars, right? Each one of these things, blue cat, pizza, Mars, you know, a diffusion model has been trained on many, many examples of these images,
Uh-huh.
so that it's been trained on like a billion images of bicycles, different, styles, different angles, et cetera, different variations, so that
Yeah.
it's seen a lot of examples. It can tell you what a bicycle is. A cat, same thing. Mars, same thing. So now it kind of learns and understands what makes a thing. And then you say, make me a new thing that you haven't seen. And it will create this new image based on your prompt, right? That never existed before. It's not on Google search, it's not on Getty Images, it's not on anything. It's been created, and it can create multiple variations and different versions of this that are quite diverse, but all are blue cat eating pizza, riding a bicycle on Mars, right?
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
so that's an example of a diffusion model. You've got your Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, you've got Sora, you've got all of these different, diffusion models that work extraordinarily well and are transforming the way that people, do certain types of digital work. We do basically the same thing, the same principle, except we use the language of chemistry. So when you define the molecule that you want, you say, I want it, to have a molecular weight of below this, right? I want solubility like this. I want, topological polar surface area of that. I want like 3 hydrogen bond donors, but no more than four, and you define these, and these are our prompts. And
So
so
if you said this whole process is about drug discovery,
that's right.
how can you specify those without knowing what you're going to discover?
Just like you want an image that hits these properties, but you don't know what the image is going to look like.
So you're describing the attributes you want.
You're plugging in the attributes you want, and then it creates molecules that fulfill all of those properties.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's just like that diffusion model, right? Like you might have an idea, it might come in a different style and might have different angles and different variations. But in each case, the image that's generated is new. It didn't exist before. It's novel. And that's really the problem that we're solving in drug discovery, is because going back to one of the reasons why drug discovery is very hard is the potential space of all drug-like molecules that exist in nature is, we call it
Huge.
chemical space,
Uh-huh.
is about 10 to the 63. And that's a massive number. It's like a billion times, a billion times, a billion times, a billion times, a billion times more than all the stars in the visible universe. Like it's just absolute. You cannot search this. You cannot brute force screen it. You can't search it. It's just too big. So instead of doing that, instead of looking like brute force searching every molecule to see if it'll fit, it'll, hit some kind of protein,
Yeah.
we start from the design. This is the molecule that we want. Now design that molecule to meet all of these properties. And so just like a generative model, we use the language of chemistry in what's known as a target product profile, which chemists use to kind of define what compound or what molecule they want. We just take that, you plug it into our platform that's called Enki, and then it generates a number of these novel structures. And then, of course, you have to choose which ones you actually want to make, and then you test in an experimental sort of assay. And in doing so, what we've shown is that we can do things much faster, much more efficiently with great potent and selective molecules. But most importantly, these are novel in the sense that they weren't around before. People hadn't thought of them or haven't